Most of you will be very familiar indeed with the name, if not with the actual or work of Professor Peter Harvey. I only need to mention that he's the author of an introduction to Buddhism, which is probably, surely, the most successful book of that character ever published, in the sense that it's been used as a textbook, and still is being used as a textbook in a vast number of universities in the Western world, and not only in the original English, but it's been translated into Spanish, Italian, and French.
Yeah.
Or Latin.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, Peter became perhaps even better known for the fact that he initiated the first really thorough, high-standard distance learning course from the University of Sunderland, where he was professor for many years until his recent retirement. And so that, of course, spread knowledge of Buddhism to a great many people all over the world, which is very remarkable. And his good works have not been confined to the rest of the world, but also he's been very, very successful in Britain. He is one of the two co-founders, I think it's correct to say, of the UK Association of Buddhist Studies, which has done a great deal for the subject in this country. So without keeping you from him any further, let me introduce that he's going to talk about bhava, becoming, we'll hear how to translate it. His title is Going Beyond Any Way of Being, bhava and its stopping in Pali Buddhism.
I could have called it To Be or Not to Be, neither of the above. Perhaps. Right, okay. Right, the nature of the conditioning link that is bhava. Most people with a reasonable knowledge of Buddhism will be familiar with the teaching on conditioned co-arising or dependent origination, which concerns a series of 12 nidanas or conditioned and conditioning links, one leading to the next. So I've just kind of summarised them, the first thing on the handout A, with some brief explanations drawn from the suttas on what each of those are. So I won't read that out, it just may be useful to refer back to that at certain points. The Buddha is said to have seen and unravelled this sequence on the night of his enlightenment, tracing the links from the end one, or maybe number 11 rather than 12, backwards. That is, he saw that the various sufferings of life can only arise due to birth, which various passages make clear means the very beginning of life, that is, conception. He then saw that birth, in this sense, arises conditioned by bhava. Now, the noun bhava relates to the word bhavati, which means is or comes to be. And so bhava is variously translated as becoming, existence, and being. But I've always been somewhat puzzled by its meaning as the condition for birth and as conditioned by grasping. It seems odd to say that birth is conditioned by existence as a whole, and becoming and being are also rather too all-encompassing in meaning here. So, how is bhava explained in the texts? There are said to be three forms of bhava as a nidana, as a link in conditioned arising. Those of sense desire or sense pleasures, karma. Those of the kind of pure form level, rupa, relating to jhana. And thirdly, of the formless, arupa level. That is, bhavas pertaining to the three main levels of Buddhist cosmology and sensory and meditative experience. This does not take us very far, though. Now, in the suttas, or the Nikayas, the most explicit passage on bhava is the one which I've given as passage B on the handout. Ananda, if there are no karma to ripen in the realm of sense pleasures, would sense pleasures, bhava, be discerned? Surely not, Lord. In this way, Ananda, karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, craving is the moisture. For beings hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving, consciousness is supported in a lower realm. Thus there is production of further bhava in the future. Thus, Ananda, there is bhava. then parallel statements are given for the pure form realm, which is middling, and the formless realm, which is excellent. And the following sort of says precisely the same, except that volition and aspiration are supported in one of the three realms, that is, rebirth realms, with consciousness still being the seed for this. That is, each of the three bhavas is related to, or even is, the karma that leads to further being, rebirth existence, in one of the three levels. Such rebirth occurs with consciousness as its seed, planted in a field of karma, moistened by craving, so that consciousness, volition, and aspiration are supported in the relevant level. This gives a bit more detail on the nature of bhava, as the process leading to a new rebirth. It certainly shows that bhava here does not just mean being or existence as such, but concerns particular kinds of rebirth-producing processes. This aligns with the fact that in an Indian context, jati, or birth, does not just mean the start of any life, but also it means a particular class or kind of person or being. So if one thinks of the Nidana's bhava leading to jati, it seems to be a particular kind of bhava, a particular kind of existence leads to a particular kind of resultant rebirth. And this is kind of taken up, you see in the Vibhanga commentary, says, here it might be asked, but how is it to be known that bhava is a condition for birth? Because of the observable differences of inferiority and superiority in spite of equality of external conditions. For, in spite of equality of external conditions, such as father, mother, seed, blood, nutriment, etc., the differences of beings, there are differences of beings even if they are twins, is observable. This makes me think that perhaps the best way of translating bhava as a nidana is as a way of being, a mode or manner of being. In other contexts, though, such as in the term punna bhava, kind of again or further bhava, repeated bhava, I think bhava just can be best translated as an existence, a life, a rebirth. But as a nidana, it seems to be best seen as a way of being. As to bhava as just an existence, this is probably the meaning when it is said nirvana is the stopping or cessation of bhava. So, bhava now in the Abhidhammas. One time I'd thought that the bhava nidana was probably this equivalent to the antara bhava, the intermediary or existence, the between life existence that links to rebirths. And while the Theravada Abhidhamma does not accept such a state, seeing conception as immediately following the death moment of the previous life, a number of early schools, such as the Sarvastivada, accepted such a state, and I feel there's a strand of material in the Pali Nikayas that are supportive of the idea. However, even in the Sarvastivadin-related Abhidhamma Koja Bhashya, this text does not see the bhava nidana as the between-life existence, or at least does not see it as just this. So even in the classic text which accepts the between-life existence, it doesn't say this is what the bhava nidana is. The Abhidhamma Koja Bhashya says, he does actions which will have for their results future bhava. This is bhava. So the actions which lead to bhava, which lead to a future existence, are bhava. The text's own commentary says on this, bhava signifies karma, for bhava takes place by reason of it. Action done and accumulated in the search for pleasures will produce re-existence. The period during which one does this action constitutes bhava. The text also, commenting on the 12 nidanas, says that the volitional activities, sankharas, and bhava are karma. And it even cites Anantre Sutta saying, Ananda, karma that produces a new existence is the nature of bhava. Just finishing off on the Abhidhamma Koja Bhashya, it says, Upapati, or rebirth, signifies birth or an existence characterized by a certain realm, a certain destiny, like as a god or a human, a certain mode of birth, a certain gender, etc. Abhinivritti, abhinibhati in Pali, production, signifies existence without qualification. The cause of birth is karma, and the cause of re-existence, abhinivritti, is craving. So too, a seed is the cause of a shoot, characterized as a rice shoot, a wheat shoot, whereas water is a cause of the simple germination of all different species of shoots. Kind of echoes back to the idea that craving is like the moisture for the whole process. That is, craving determines that one is reborn, while karma determines how one is reborn, and this karma is the bhava nidana. This identification of the bhava nidana with karma is also found in the Theravadian Abhidhamma, but it's also sees as another aspect to it as well. So we have now quote C on the handout from the Vibhanga. Therein, what is bhava from grasping as condition? Bhava is twofold. There is karma bhava and there is rebirth, upati bhava. Therein, what is karma bhava? The good volitional activity, bad volitional activity, and unshakable volitional activity, which leads to the formless level. This is called karma bhava. Also, all karma leading to bhava is karma bhava. So, various kinds of karma are bhava. Therein, what is rebirth bhava? Sense pleasures bhava, pure form bhava, formless bhava, various other kinds of rebirth existences are rebirth bhava. Okay. That is, the bhava conditioned by grasping is a way of being with both a karmic aspect to it and an aspect that is a kind of rebirth resulting from such karmas or actions. One's way of being is how one acts and the rebirth type shaped by such actions. As for the bhava which conditions rebirth, because you've got grasping leading to bhava, and then you've got bhava leading to rebirth. So, and the tradition understands bhava in slightly different ways, because grasping leads to both kinds of bhava, the active side to one's being, and the non-active side, whereas the bhava which leads to rebirth is just the active aspect of one's being. So the Patisambhida Magga says, here in the present life, with the maturing of the sense bases, there is delusion, which is ignorance. There is accumulation, which is volitional activities. There is longing, which is craving. Adoption, which is grasping. Volition, which is bhava. Thus, these 5 states in karma bhava here are conditions for rebirth linking in the future. As the commentarial literature, such as the Visuddhimagga, says, it is bhavati, and it makes be bhavayati, thus it is bhava. So, 2 aspects of bhava. Again, the more active thing which makes be, and then there's the being which is a result of those activities. An awkwardness here is that the non-karmic aspect of bhava is itself jati or birth, and what follows from this. So this aspect of bhava, the non-karmic the non-karmic aspect of bhava, can itself be a condition for birth because it already includes it. Hence the Vibhanga commentary says, as regards the description with bhava as condition birth, here only karma bhava is intended by bhava, for it is that, not rebirth bhava, which is a condition for birth. It is only karma bhava that is a condition for birth. Okay. Now, take the focus of bhava directly and look at the conditions which lead to it. 4 kinds of grasping and how they condition one's way of being. The nidana of grasping is generally explained as grasping at sense pleasures, at views, at conduct and vows, silavata, and at self-doctrine. It is clear that grasping at sense pleasures would naturally lead on to certain kinds of karma or action, and thus shape a certain kind of resultant rebirth way of being. Grasping at any view would also clearly lead to a certain kind of rigidity of being, a certain kind of narrowness, though the Dhammasangani of the Theravadian Abhidhamma sees grasping at views as specifically grasping at the view which denies the importance and result of how one acts, and also rebirth. That is, it equates it with archetypal wrong view. And it also sees grasping at a self-doctrine as holding any of the 20 forms of Sakayaditi view on personality, that is, taking any of the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates or bundles, as a substantial self, possession of it, containing it, or be contained by such a self. Grasping at conduct and vows needs a little more explaining, and again has always been a little bit unclear to me. Conduct here translates sila, otherwise translated by such terms as moral virtue, which is something much encouraged in Buddhism. Vows translates vata, which might also be translated as observances, and the phrase conduct and vows is also sometimes used in a positive way in the texts. The phrase certainly does not mean rites and rituals, as it is sometimes translated by some ritual disliking Protestant Buddhists of the past. The Anguttara Nikaya says that some conduct and vows and celibate holy life are of good fruit, those that increase wholesome states and decrease unwholesome states, but not those that do the opposite. You could probably say the same of ritual. There's good ritual and bad ritual. The Atthakavagga of the Sutta Nipata has various things to say on wrongly relating to conduct and vows. It is seen as ignoble to tell others, unasked, of one's conduct and vows. One should not look down on others based on one's conduct and vows, this being a restricting tie and a conceit. The external conduct and vows does not prove someone is a Brahmin in the sense of spiritually developed. Attachment to sila as the sole thing needed for spiritual purity is said to actually lead to further bhava, further existence, further rebirth. It leads to longing for purity and agitation when one falls short in some way. That perhaps nicely sums up a certain kind of attachment to religious and moral purity and the kind of stiffness associated with it. The Sutta Nipata particularly associates all of this with asceticism, tapas, and abstemiousness. And the Udana sees those who see conduct and vows as the essential thing as those people are engaged in the extreme that is the opposite one to those who pursue sense pleasures as faultless. So remember the middle way, the two extremes, asceticism and going after sense pleasures. So it equates clinging to conduct and vows as the ascetic extreme. Grasping at conduct and vows is the way of the extreme ascetic, self-mortification, the opposite way to those who grasp at sense pleasures. That said, the Udana commentary here sees things somewhat more broadly. It says sila here is thinking, I will not do it, some bad action of some kind. Vows as the difficult practice of eating that which is poisonous and so on. Or worshipping Shiva or Skanda, etc., by offering small balls of food or floor coverings. It rather expands the concept from an earlier tradition. The Dhammasangani sees both the fetter of clinging to conduct and vows and clinging to them as the view held by outside renunciants and Brahmins that purity is only by conduct, by pure vows, by pure conduct and vows. This kind of view going to views. Such conduct is explained as that such as the practice of ascetics who act like dogs or oxen, and the Samyutta Nikaya contrasts the true virtue of ancient Brahmins with contemporary ones given to fasting, sleeping on the ground, bathing at dawn, rough hides, matted locks and dirt, hymns, conduct and vows, austerities, but with sense doors unguarded. That said, it is surely the case that Buddhists can also have a clinging to and a dogmatic attitude to their conduct and vows. Though I once had a conversation with a monk who insisted that the only meaning of these fetters was acting like an ox or a cow. I thought, there's not much of that around. But anyway. This particular fetter is seen as replaced by a stream enterer's virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unmottled, freeing, praised by the wise, and unclung to, and leading to concentration. The stream enterer does not have clinging, paramasa, to any kind of sila and vows, but has unblemished, yet unclung to, sila. He knows that sila is only part of the path, and is generally pure but not rigid conduct, so as not to have mental rigidity and clinging to a certain way of doing things. The relationship of the four forms of grasping is suggested by a passage from the Vibhanga commentary. Usually in a single existence, belief in eternity and annihilation, as in views on personality, Sakaya-ditthi, is preceded by the assumption of a self. After that, in one who assumes this self is eternal, there arises grasping at conduct and vows for purifying the self. And in one who assumes that it breaks up and who thus disregards the next world, there arises grasping at sense pleasure, so the two extremes of conduct. This seems to see perhaps the I am conceit as the self-doctrine grasping and as the deepest kind of grasping, which conditions either viewing oneself as an eternal self that needs purifying by ascetic actions, or a denial of rebirth and attachment to the pursuit of sense pleasures of this life. More generally, one might see the graspings as self-centeredness and clinging to a related account of oneself and to views of what is true and important, whatever those are, and grasping at fixed ways of doing things or at sense pleasures. These inevitably affect where and how one's energies are directed and how they are crystallized in or collapse into a certain way of being in the world. So that's how grasping leads to bhava. The focus of one's grasping fuel and shape the kind of person one is. They shape one's identity, one's nature. The grasping that leads to bhava is sometimes also explained simply as grasping at any of the five khandhas, five bundles or aggregates. And this grasping is described as the conduit to bhava. Then just wind it back one more. How craving leads to grasping. While the nidana of craving is often explained as craving for objects of the six senses, in the first sermon it is explained as craving for sense pleasures, for bhava, and for vibhava, the opposite of bhava. The first of these, cravings for sense pleasures, and how it leads to grasping at sense pleasures, seems straightforward. The commentaries see grasping at sense pleasures as firmness of craving. Firmness of craving is a name for subsequent craving that has become firm owing to previous craving. But what of craving for bhava and vibhava? For being, or a way of being, and for destruction or extermination. A passage which helps one understand this is passage E, from the Visuddhimagga. It's from the Ita-Vitaka, but quoted in the Visuddhimagga. There are two kinds of view, monks, and when gods and humans are obsessed by them, some hold back and some overreach. Only those with eyes see. And how do some hold back? Gods and humans love bhava, delight in bhava, rejoice in bhava, and that's existence, being, way of being. When the Dhamma is taught to them for the ceasing of bhava, their minds do not enter into it or become settled, steady and resolute. Thus it is that some hold back. And how do some overreach? Some are ashamed, humiliated and disgusted by that same bhava. They are concerned with vibhava in this way. Sirs, when with the breakup of the body this self is cut off, annihilated, is not any more after death, this is peaceful, this is excellent, this is definitive. Thus it is that they overreach. And how do those with eyes see? Here amongst sees that what has become as that which has become. Having seen what has become as that which has become, he practices for turning away from, for dispassion from, for cessation or stopping of that which has become. This is how one with eyes sees. That is, Craving for bhava is craving to continue to exist in any way of being, while craving for vibhava is a longing for the peace of an expected annihilation at the end of this life. When any of these cravings are operative, they then feed the forms of grasping that give shape to a particular way of being in the world, that then shapes what one becomes as a result, rebirth result of that. Craving for bhava, for being and for extermination of being, can also have a less metaphysical focus. In the Atthaka Vagga it is said, desire arises from what they call pleasant and unpleasant in the world. Seeing vibhava and bhava in forms, probably in the sense of visible forms, a person makes his decision in the world. Also, the pleasant and the unpleasant have their origin in sensory stimulation, phassa. That thing which is vibhava and bhava too, I tell you that this also has its origin in this. And likewise, an Udana passage says, the world is full of torment, being beset by sensory stimulation, speaks to itself of ill health. For in whatever way it conceives it to be, that is otherwise than that. Destined to that which is otherwise, attached to what bhava is the world. Beset by bhava, simply rejoices in it. This implies that craving for bhava and vibhava can also be for the continuance or ending of particular things that one experiences due to sense contact, which are things that are in constant change and are not what they seem. As the Buddha is said to have reflected after his enlightenment, again an Udana passage, destined to that which is otherwise. Attached to bhava is the world. Beset by bhava, it simply rejoices in it. That in which it rejoices is fearful, that of which it fears is dukkha, painful. It is indeed for the total abandonment of bhava that this holy life is lived. Some who are renunciants and Brahmins say that the complete freedom from bhava is by way of bhava. All these, I say, are not completely released from bhava. Moreover, some who are renunciants and Brahmins say that the escape from bhava is by way of vibhava, the extermination. All these, I say, are not escape from bhava. For whatever bhavas everywhere, in all cases, all these bhavas are impermanent, painful states which are of a nature to change. So this is seen as it really is, or as it really becomes, actually, by one with right wisdom. Craving for vibhava is abandoned. It is not delight in vibhava, the opposite. For the monk who has attained nirvana, there is, through non-grasping, no further bhava, no further existence. The cravings for bhava and vibhava are seen as respectively associated with the views of bhava and vibhava. The Vibhanga sees these two cravings respectively as attachment, infatuation and falling in with, accompanied with either bhava view or vibhava view. And the Vibhanga also explains these views respectively as the views that the self, also the world, will be or will not be. The Visuddhimagga says, when visible form craving occurs, enjoying with sense desire enjoyment, a visible form as object that has come into focus of the eye, it is called craving for sense pleasures. But when that same visible form craving occurs, along with the eternity view that assumes that the same object to be lasting and eternal, it is called craving for bhava. For it is the attachment accompanying the eternity view that is called craving for bhava. When it occurs along with the annihilation view that assumes that the same object to break up and be destroyed, it is called craving for vibhava. For it is the attachment accompanying the annihilation view that is called craving for vibhava. Of course, we can probably also say that craving for vibhava must surely be associated with aversion or even hatred for what one craves an ending of. The commentarial texts also link craving for bhava with attachment to jhana and the formless states. It says, for example, craving for bhava is a term for craving concerning the pure form and formless bhava, accompanied by the eternity view which has arisen through aspiring for existence and for longing for jhana. I'll come back to that link to jhana later on. Okay, so that's various ways in which it's kind of tracing how aspects of craving, aspects of grasping, aspects of a way of being, and the kind of perhaps connections that there are. But now talk about the cessation of bhava in life. Of course, the goal of the Buddhist path in the Nikayas is the cessation of all the nidanas and the pains that they bring. Now, an arahat will not be reborn anymore, hence his future jati nidana and what it would lead to have ended. But for this to be the case, for there to be no future jati, his or her current craving, grasping, and way of being, which are the conditions for jati, must cease. But what does it mean for one's bhava, one's way of being, to cease? A simple answer would be to say that one's actions no longer generate karmic results. But then one can ask, and why is this so? What is it about an arahant that means that his or her karmic being ceases? Of the arahat it is said, when a monk has abandoned these three kinds of bhava, for sense, pleasures, form and the formless, and has completed these three trainings in higher virtue, higher mind and wisdom, he is called a monk who has cut off craving, stripped off the fetter, completely broken through conceit. He has made an end of the painful. The fetter that is stripped off is identified in one of the arahant formulas as the bhava fetter. Okay, so need to start looking at what does it mean to have ended bhava in life. The Abhidhamma-Koja gives one clue. It says, now it is by reason of the anusayas, the latent tendencies, that actions accumulate. And it says the roots of existence, that is, of rebirth or active of actions, are the anusayas. So the anusayas, the latent tendencies, are seen as certainly relevant, and to be without them means that one will not generate karmic results. I think also related to this, and related to the latent tendencies, is going beyond being reckoned as anything. So kind of not being anything. It is said of the arahant, for that does not exist for him by which one could describe him. Also, that which means any of the khandhas, for which one has a latent tendency, by that is he reckoned. What he does not have a latent tendency for, by that is he not reckoned. And so the latent tendencies are deeply ingrained ways in which the mind clings to and becomes involved in conditioned phenomena. They are identified elsewhere as the tendencies to attachment, aversion, ignorance, views, vacillation, conceit, and attachment to bhava. It is said that in response to feeling, holding on to pleasant feeling shows the activity of the latent tendency to attachment. Lamenting at unpleasant feelings show the activity of the latent tendency to aversion, and lack of understanding of neutral feeling shows the activity of the latent tendency to ignorance. That is, feelings are often responded to by attachment, hatred, delusion. An enlightened person, however, being without such tendencies, gives no clue as to what he is about. He cannot be reckoned in terms of any of the five khandhas. For example, as a very physical person, a man of feeling, an intellectual, a schemer, a planner, a discerning person, a connoisseur. This situation is because even in life, an enlightened person has abandoned the khandhas, which is explained to mean that he has no desire or attachment for them. They are simply a burden. And the enlightened person is one who is with burden dropped. He or she does not hang on to the khandhas as if they were permanent, pleasurable, or self. He does not identify with them as if they were a true self or I, or the possession of such a thing, but sees them as merely conditioned phenomena. Thus he does not cling to anything, whether internal to his or her khandhas or external to them. Hence we get, and this is quote F on the handout, from the Majjhima Nikaya, even so Vacha, that material form, or any of the other four khandhas, by which one defining a Tathagata, an enlightened person, might define him, that material form for a Tathagata is abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump that can come to no further existence, and is no more liable to rise again in the future. Freed from reckoning by material form is a Tathagata. He is deep, immeasurable, hard to fathom as is the great ocean. The immeasurability of the Arahant is because the attachment, hatred and delusion he has destroyed are each said to be productive of the measurable. And having abandoned the khandhas, he is thus, quote, escaped from, unfettered by, released from them, and dwells with a mind made to be without boundaries. The Arahant feels no attraction or repugnance for objects of the six senses, and so is independent, released, unfettered. This all means that the Arahant is beyond the influence of Mara. It's also said, by whatever they grasp at in the world, by that very thing Mara follows a creature. Okay, so that's aspects of not being reckoned, being immeasurable, being beyond the anusayas. What else might be relevant to going beyond the bhava nidana? So the next thing to look at is not identifying with anything, and so as to be beyond conceit. The Arahant does not identify with anything as what he, as a supposed self, is. This is his or her, literally, non-identification, ahtamayata, literally the state of not consisting of that. Seeing all as non-self, he is without eye-making, mind-making, and is without identification in the entire world. To have such an identification is, for example, said, to praise oneself for having attained jhana, or to look down on others who have not done so. However, it is said, this is Majjhima Nikaya, a true man considers thus, non-identification, even with the attainment to the first jhana, or any subsequent jhana or former state, has been declared by the Blessed One. For in whatever way they conceive it, the fact is ever other than that. So, putting non-identification first, he neither lauds himself nor disparages others because of his attainment to the first jhana, or any other jhana. Such a person, having attained arahantship after attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, beyond the highest form of state, it is said, does not conceive anything, he does not conceive in regard to anything, he does not conceive in any way. And the Arahant, with respect to the whole range of phenomena, starting with earth, it is said, is one who, having directly known earth as earth, does not conceive of himself as earth, he does not conceive in earth, he does not conceive of himself apart from earth, he does not conceive earth as mine, he does not delight in earth. And the same for a whole range of other things. He just doesn't find himself anywhere, so to speak. That is, the Arahant does not build an identity on anything, that he has a focus of conceit. So there's no place of self-centeredness or self-importance to rest or breed. Next kind of issue, kind of related to that, is the Arahant as a kind of man of nothing. As Ayakema says in her Being Nobody, Going Nowhere, the spiritual path is all about letting go. There is nothing to achieve or gain. In reality, a spiritual path is a path of renunciation, letting go, constantly dropping all we have built up around ourselves. These include possessions, conditioned habits, ideas, beliefs, thinking patterns. And one can also add to these inclusions skillful meditative states that one develops, become, but must also learn to let go of. So, quote G. Now, so the Arahant is said to be kind of a man of nothing, one who has nothing. One should discard anger, cast off conceit, transcend all fetters. No pains torment one who has nothing, akinkanang, so who does not adhere to name and form. For whom there is nothing before or after or in the middle, having nothing, without grasping, him I called a Brahmin. So the Arahant is without anything, anything being kinchana. But the term kinchana has interesting connotations. Diga passage says that attachment, hatred and delusion are each a kinchana, literally a something. And the Majjhima Nikaya passage adds that of all the kinds of deliverance of mind through nothingness, kinchana, not anything, nothing, the unshakable deliverance of mind of the Arahant is pronounced best. A kinchana then is a particular kind of something. The commentaries see it as a kind of obstruction. The Vibhanga commentary says, kinchanas are obstructions. An attachment arises that it binds beings and obstructs them. So also with hate and delusion. Bhikkhu Bodhi's Samyutta Nikaya translation says, it refers to a passage in the Samyutta commentary, says it explains kinchana as if it were derived from a verb kinchati, glossed as to Pali words meaning crushes or impedes, thus as meaning obstruction or impediment. The word is used idiomatically in Pali to mean a possession considered as an impediment. And the Pali Text Society Dictionary says of it, from the frequent context in the older texts, to assume the moral implication, something that sticks or adheres to the character of a man, and which he must get rid of. This all suggests to me that a kinchana is a something to be bothered by, a crystallization in the open field of perception that becomes a concern, a burden, a problem that one holds onto in an attached, hating or deluded way. The Arahant, though, is one for whom there is nothing on him, like the moon on a clear full moon night. We've got nothing on the Arahant, and he's got nothing, so to speak. He is one having nothing, not attached to sensual pleasures and bhava. A true practitioner knows all bhavas are impermanent and dukkha, and practices for the cessation of bhavas without conceit. Likewise, an Anguttara passage says, a Brahmin says thus, I am not anywhere the belonging of anyone, nor is there anything in any place that is mine. Speaking thus, a Brahmin speaks the truth, not falsehood. It does not on that account hold conceits on himself as a renunciant, or a Brahmin. It does not hold conceits on himself as I am better, or I am equal, or I am worst. Rather, having directly known the truth in that, he is practicing the path of nothingness. Clearly this is something that goes beyond the former sphere of nothingness, although it may have something to do with it as well. On a parallel passage on I am not anywhere anything, a passage in the Majjhima says, Bodhi comments on this parallel passage and says that this is about the four-pointed emptiness. He does not see his self anywhere. He does not see a self of his that can be treated as something belonging to another, for example, as a brother, a friend, an assistant, etc. He does not see the self of another. He does not see the self of another that can be treated as something belonging to him. So, interesting collection of things. Anyway, a final thing to look at in terms of being beyond a way of being is being without the asavas. Perhaps the most crucial thing about arahants is that they are ones with asavas destroyed, kinasava. The asavas are things that lead to rebirth. They are said to lead to the root of being, the root of bhava, and their results are, quote, one immersed in ignorance produces a corresponding individual existence, and which may be the consequence of either good or bad actions. And it is also said that there are particular kinds of asavas that lead to the 6 different kind of rebirths, destinies. Now, just as I puzzled on the meaning of bhava, I've puzzled on the meaning and translation of asava. As a term, it has these translations, and probably others: inflows, influxes, influences, outflows, effluents, corruptions, cankers, taints, and fermentations. That's Tanisaro's last one. So, quite a lot. They are listed as 3 in many passages. calm asava, the asava related to sense pleasures, and the asava related to bhava, and the asava related to ignorance. And sometimes a fourth one is added, the asava related to ditti, views. Often these terms are translated in the form the asava of X, like the asava of views, the asava of sense pleasures, sense desire, implying that bhava and the rest are each themselves an asava. But there are reasons to doubt this, which in turn raise the issue of how best to translate the term asava. The Abhidhamma does not see bhava itself as an asava, as the Dhammasangani, for example, explains the asava related to bhava as craving for bhava, just as it explains karmasava as the craving for sense pleasures. That said, the Dhammasangani does explain the asava related to views as simply certain kinds of views, the views on the undetermined issues relating to the world, the life principle, the fate of the enlightened person after death. And it also says the asava related to ignorance is simply ignorance and is equated with delusion. Accordingly, the Attasalani, the commentary on the Dhammasangani, says the asava which is view asava is just view. The asava which is ignorance is just ignorance is ignorance asava. So that's it. Some asavas are seen as equated with what they're linked to, views and ignorance, and some is the craving for what they're linked to. As to the meaning of asava, Bhikkhu Bodhi, who uses the translation taint, explains the commentaries derive the word from a root su, meaning to flow. Scholars differ as to whether the flow implied by the prefix a is inward or outward. Hence some have rendered it as influxes or influences, others as outflows or effluents. There certainly is a link to the verb asavati, which means flows towards, flows from, flows down. But asava can also have the meaning of a fermented liquor, an intoxicant, or the discharge from a wound. The latter sense, which seems linked to the translation kanka, is seen in an Anguttara passage, which says of a person whose mind is like an open sore, in that they're easily angered. Just as a festering sore, if struck by a stick or shard, will give a flow, give an asava, of even more matter, so too some person here is prone to anger. So their asava is like the discharge from a festering sore. Bhikkhu Analayo, though, sees the asavas as inflowing things, and thus translate them as influxes. He says, the notion of an inflow becomes particularly evident with the topic of sense restraint, which according to the standard exposition in the Pali discourses is concerned with the flowing in anvasavati of what is detrimental. The close relationship of this expression to the term asava is obvious, hence the practice of restraining the senses in the Sabhasava Sutta, the sutta on all the asavas, and its parallel is clearly not a case where asava has the meaning of outflow, and thus does not stand in contrast to the sense of inflow with which the same term is invested in Jain usage. And the asavas are a crucial concept in Jainism, where they are the kind of things with how karma as a kind of subtle matter flows into the life principle, the soul. And some people have said, well, the idea of asava in Buddhism is just a borrowing of that term without properly adapting it to Buddhism, perhaps. But anyway, the quote of Analayo continues, rather, sense restraint appears to be concerned with avoiding the influence as a psychologically conceived flowing in that need not involve a material substance, as in Jainism, of external detrimental factors on the mind. Thus there seems to be no need to assume that the term asava is a maladapted borrowing of Jain terminology. So he particularly argues for the translation inflow, influence, because of a connection with how sense restraint is talked about. Passages on guarding the sense doors, the sense faculties, which warn against grasping at signs and features or details and features of objects of the five senses or mind, do say that such grasping means, quote, that longing and displeasure, evil and unwholesome states would flow, and that the relevant flowing is a flowing in does seem supported by a passage in the Samyutta which likens a person to a frontier city with 6 gates, that's the 5 senses and the mind, guarded by a wise gatekeeper, mindfulness, who is careful as to who he lets in through the senses. Also, in a Sutta Nipata verse, warns that a monk should not be tainted by things such as alms food, just as a lotus leaf is untainted by drops of water. And perhaps more directly, in an Anguttara passage where the Buddha, after saying that he has destroyed the asavas leading to being a human, a god or a spirit, likens himself to a lotus flower untainted or unsoiled by water that it stands above. So that suggests a kind of protection from things flowing inwards. Also, the Anguttara passage which says that this mind is brightly shining, it is defiled by visiting defilements, agantu kehi upakalesehi, implies that defilements, as elsewhere summarised as 5 hindrances, are things that enter the mind, which visit, come from outside. However, even when the mind is in jhana, without any active defilements in it, an unenlightened person still surely has asavas undestroyed. They're not arahats. That is, any incoming sense perceptions only have a deleterious effect on the mind of the unenlightened, those with asavas remaining. The asavas must thus be something, or an asava must be something that welcomes certain sense inputs and also reaches out to them. The flowing must be in some sense a two-way thing, a reaching out that welcomes a certain kind of inflow that then further inflames the reaching out in an intoxicating way. And it's notable that even in Jainism, where the ashravas, as they say in their language, the ashravas that are that through which karmic matter is seen to flow into the jiva life essence, they are nevertheless, at least according to Dundas, an expert on Jainism, he chooses to translate them as channels. So it's not just an inflow, it's a connection, linking the sense organ to the sense object. Acharya Buddha Rakita, who's written on a little book called The Mind Overcoming Its Cankers, the asavas, says, the asavas die hard, even though rendered inactive by overcoming through meditative elimination of the mental hindrances, as in jhana. They continue to smoulder as dormant tendencies or compulsions. Moreover, he says, the asavas are like fires in the mind. One needs to extinguish this fire, for if not properly put out, it will grow into a mighty conflagration, swallow everything that falls in its raging path, becomes destructive and consuming. As things which flow out, reaching towards certain things, the asavas can be seen as kinds of inclinations. And the Anguttara says that the mind of one without asavas destroyed slants, slopes, inclines to seclusion. It is withdrawn, delighting in renunciation, and is entirely finished with all things that are the basis for the asavas. That is, while the asavas are inclinations of the mind in a problematic direction, the inclination of an asavi-free mind is different. It gives no nourishment for the asavas to feed on. Again, Buddha Rakita says, he usefully summarises the nature of an asava as, quote, a dormant, unwholesome tendency or inclination which is an inborn disposition. For myself, I think the nature of an asava is well expressed in the translation intoxicating inclination. So I've added another one to the list. They are like addictions which reach out for their favoured focus, consuming it, consuming it, then are affected by it so as to be further inflamed in a kind of feedback loop. As Buddha Rakita says, it is to be understood that asava is asava by virtue of a certain function, namely its capacity to establish a feedback mechanism. The The Abhidharma-koja Bhaja also says that asavas flow out by the 6 organs which are as wounds. And the commentary on the Sabhasava Sutta, the sutta on all the asavas, says, and this is quote H, which includes another one as well, therein they flow, asavanti, asavas. It is said that they flow from the senses and the mind, they circulate about. As dhammas, they flow as far as change of lineage, just less than stream entry, and as to space, as far as the highest bhava, the highest rebirth existence. The meaning is that these dhammas circulate within this space. Keeping within is denoted by the prefix a. The asavas are, moreover, like the juices of the Madira fruits, which become intoxicants by fermentation over time. In the world, long fermented Madira fruits are called asavas. If by long fermentation they are called intoxicants, then those mental states are also worthy of the name. And then the following quote from the Visuddhimagga, asava, concerning objects as far as change of lineage and as far as the highest existence, there are flows. It is a term for attachment to sense pleasures, attachment to bhava, wrong view and ignorance, due to flowing from the unguarded sense doors like waters from cracks in a pot, in the sense of constant trickling, or as flowing towards the pains of samsara. That the asavas are ingrained inclination towards certain things is also shown by the fact that ignorance is seen as a condition for the arising of the asavas, and they are the condition for the arising of ignorance. As one of the asavas is itself the ignorance asava, this would make little sense if this asava was simply ignorance. So ignorance conditions something which is just ignorance. It doesn't kind of make a lot of sense. But it does make sense, though, to say that ignorance conditions the intoxication inclinations towards sense pleasures, bhava, views, and more ignorance, and these in turn conditioning ignorance. It kind of makes sense of that kind of causal relationship. It is also said that ignorance and craving for bhava are both beginningless, with craving for bhava being conditioned by ignorance, and this by the 5 hindrances, and this by misconduct of body, speech and mind. It makes sense to see the intoxication inclinations towards ignorance and bhava as the deepest and most hard to eradicate asavas. In fact, there's a Digha passage which says ignorance and craving for bhava are the 2 things that need to be abandoned, the kind of real things that need sorting out. This is because the inclination towards views, the reason why these are the 2 crucial asavas, the deepest ones, because the inclination towards the asava related to views, inclination towards views, which is sometimes missed off the list of asavas, is surely overcome at stream entry, especially with the ending of the fetter of view on personality. Moreover, the inclination towards sense pleasures must be ended by the non-returner, who has ended all the fetters pertaining to the realm of sense pleasures, including sense desire and its contrasting pair aversion. If you now look at the chart, which is the kind of quote I, which I referred to a few times, I've tried to interrelate various lists of problematic qualities. So on the left hand you've got the 10 fetters, and a reminder of what kind of noble person overcomes them, and then related to the asavas. Perhaps refer back to that later on, but as a summary which might be a useful discussion point. The Buddha's threefold knowledge, tevijja, and key links in the conditioned co-arising sequence. That the asavas are conditioned by ignorance is something that helps shed light on the connection between the Buddha's insight into conditioned co-arising and his threefold knowledge on the night of his enlightenment. That is, memory of many of his past lives, seeing the rebirth of others according to their karma, and having insight into the 4 realities for the noble ones, Arya Satyas, and also the asavas. So this is actually kind of quote J. So what is this connection which I've just claimed? So the first knowledge is insight into repeated birth, repeated jatis. So jati is one of the nidanas near the end. The second insight is insight into karma, the active side of one's way of being, the active side of one's bhava, as the condition for one's rebirth. So there you have two of the final links, the links 10 and 11. The third knowledge has two aspects to it. The first aspect of this is into what is dukkha, often briefly summarised or reduced to the upadana khandas, the bundles of grasping fuel, as I translate them. So how these bundles arise. And of course it's also said that birth is the birth of these. So how are these bundles, problematic bundles, born? Well, in the structure of what's usually translated the Four Noble Truths, the origin is craving. So this moves us back. We've got birth, got back, bhava, karma, and then now we've gone back to craving. Another link. But then the third knowledge has a second aspect. It's about its knowledge of the asavas, how they originate, how they cease, and the path to this. As ignorance is said to be the condition for the asavas, which we can see as the ingrained inclinations that feed into the active nidanas, such as craving, grasping, one's karmic way of being, this traces a source of the problems back further to ignorance, the first of the 12 nidanas, although it is also said to be how the mind tends to respond to neutral feelings. Thus we see that three knowledges cover a number of the most important nidanas. Further, one can see why the third knowledge has two aspects. The first two of the three knowledges can be seen as the confirmation of ordinary right view, which is primarily acceptance of the idea that karma matters and shapes one's rebirth. Then, insight into the four realities for the noble ones is equivalent to stream entry, which brings the first direct insight into these with the arising of the Dhamma-eye. Then, insight into the asavas and their cessation is equivalent to arahantship, that is, the cessation of the asavas. This occurs once the four realities have been appropriately responded to, the painful has been fully understood, its origin has been abandoned, its cessation has been experienced, and the path to this has been fully developed, as alluded to in the first sermon. Okay, so that's something which I hadn't quite twigged previously. The third knowledge is in fact really both stream entry and arahantship, one straight after the other. Okay. Now look a little bit at this Sabhasava Sutta, the sutta on all the... Oh gosh, running out of time. What shall I pick out? Right, okay. Yeah. One of the things it mentions is that the asavas are feverish and distressful. They arise and then they arise further, which is suggestive of a kind of feedback loop again. Mentioned earlier that bhavasava is sometimes related particularly to attachment to jhanas and formless states, which kind of makes sense because if you have an asava particularly related to sense pleasures, that covers the first kind of bhava, and then an asava related to bhava is more particularly covers, or that's the one that covers attachment to jhana and formless states. And if one thinks of the non-returner, they have overcome attachment to sense pleasures. They are also seen as very strong and having fully cultivated samadhi and the jhanas and formless states. So that's their kind of strong point. So, but they're still attached to bhava. So they're still attached to the subtle allurements, if you like, of jhana and the formless states. Kind of related to this is the fact, if you look at the term bhavana, cultivation, development, this is something which is generally seen in very positive light in Buddhism. Meditation is citta bhavana, cultivation of the heart, equivalent to the samadhi component of the path. Bhavana of the 7 factors of awakening is much encouraged. The highest of the 3 kinds of wisdom, deeper than the wisdom from hearing and the wisdom from reflection, is the wisdom from bhavana. It's also emphasised that one must not be attached to the skillful states that one develops, as this is itself not skillful. One must develop and let go, develop further and let go again. Okay. Yeah. Righty-ho. I was going to talk a little bit more about the non-returner who attains nirvana in between lives, because quite interestingly it said that they have fetters. They no longer have the fetter leading to rebirth, but they have the fetter relating to bhava, which is quite an interesting thing. So they are not going to get reborn, but they have enough residual karma to just kind of dip into the in-between lives, at which point their wisdom matures and they don't get reborn. Yeah. I think I should shut up now. Ask for any questions.
Well, could we have comments, questions, etc., etc.? I'll start off, Peter. There are quite a few comments I could make. Thank you very much. Lots of very interesting stuff. But perhaps you won't be very surprised to hear that I'm not very satisfied as a whole by your neglect of the word metaphor.
Right.
Of course, you use metaphors a great deal.
Yeah.
When you, for instance, when you discuss the asavas, etc., yes,
Yeah.
you say, I choose this metaphor rather than that metaphor, etc., etc., and then, like many people, you're trying to get back to a literal meaning of asava, which is, in this particular case, not a particularly fatuous search, or often it is a fatuous search. But I don't take exception when you got to the stage of saying that, all right, they got it from Jainism without properly adapting it to Buddhism, the term.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's why you use metaphors. You don't, because you don't want to go to the trouble of changing everything around, but you're going to say it's a bit. The Jains have got a concept a bit like that, and they've got a handy word for it. And as you said, that's because they believe that everything that goes wrong with you is due to something flowing into you. And so influx is a reasonable term. Of course, if you just say the Buddha believed in these three influxes, nobody in our culture, nobody who doesn't know about ancient Jainism is going to have the faintest idea what you're talking about. So it's very good to look for different metaphors, etc. But I think again and again, in a way, you could cut your discussion somewhat shorter by saying, well, this is a metaphor from here, this is a metaphor from there, etc.
But at the end of the day, metaphors have to be about something. You know, they can't be just a metaphor hanging in the air. So it's kind of, what is it trying to say? And that's what I'm trying to get at. Yes, it's a term which already had a kind of range of meanings. It was drawn in, it was adapted, it was given some different meanings as well. But at the end of the day, the real interesting question is, on what were they trying to, what was trying to be said, what was trying to be conveyed?
Well, they took a word which means flowing in on, and of course for Buddhists nothing literally flows in on you at all. But it's still, with the Jain background, gave the idea of these are sort of wrong ways of looking at life and the world. I
would say, I think Analayo makes a fair point that there are aspects of flowing in, but it's also, I think actually addiction is quite, right, you're an alcoholic, okay, you might be trying to give up. I mean, actually, I like to convey this almost just like body gesture. The asavas are like that. Kind of your hand kind of creeping off sideways towards something you were trying to give up, if you like. But I mean, if you're an alcoholic, you reach out for something that's flowing out. It literally flows in, it inflames, and then you've got some more reaching out. So it's a kind of feedback loop.
Well, yes, but that's beautiful. But I don't think you can find the vibhava asava, for instance, the influx, the craving for non-existence, or something like that. You can't. It doesn't.
It's more. Let me just think. I think you can probably have an addiction to kind of something negative, in that sort of way. you can be kind of fixated on something negative. Yeah, I think you can.
But bhava isn't just anything negative.
No.
It's total negativity, depression, suicidal tendency, or whatever.
That would be a strong form of it. I don't think it would be the only aspect of it. I think, if you're in a situation... Well, okay. Say you're in an academic conference and somebody's giving a really boring paper. You kind of want it to end. You want it to go away. Or if somebody's kind of going on at you, there can be a craving for it to stop. I think that's also kind of related to that.
I don't agree that that's what bhava.
I think it's not the main aspect of it, but I think it's within the range of it. Because it's related to also it's not just what happens after death or doesn't have to happen. It's about the flow of experiences as well. I think it's related to that as well, or it can include that. But
this is actually on an unrelated point. So if we're continuing with that
there's lots.
Right. Okay. I was actually wondering about the nature of the relationship between bhava and what happens after enlightenment, because I find that really interesting. That arahats, for instance, if you see somebody wiggling their toe in a sort of, it's Moggallana, that there are predispositions of arahats,
right?
Things they can do, and I wondered what you had to say about what happens after arahats.
You mean like kind of residual specific identity?
What is it that's going on, wiggling the big toe, or having great psychic powers, or being particularly good at reading minds?
Right.
That clearly all the things you say pertain, but it's not just a negative. It's almost like a gateway for something very positive, and I wondered how that is articulated in the... Right.
So, I mean, you're saying the arahants are just all the same, like, clones of each other. They have very particular identities as well. Is that what you're partly...
Yes, that's what I was asking about. What is the nature of the... And presumably that is dependent on earlier vows of a positive and earlier cultivations of bhavana.
Right.
And I wondered what it was that made an arahat so good at, say, something, or insight, or, that...
Well, it's obviously, like you say, it's previous cultivation.
How is that defined in terms of bhava? How is it?
Right. So, a kind of related question, which I'm never quite sure, is they must have chetana. I mean, in Abhidhamma terms, chetana is a universal. But even though chetana is karma, they don't create karma. So it's kind of, it's volition, it's chetana, but it doesn't have the effects that it normally has. Which is kind of related to what I was kind of thinking, why?
It's karma, which is neither white or black.
It's avyakata.
Yes.
It's kriya, avyakata.
Yeah.
Neither white nor black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's...
Oh, there's the smile-producing chitta of the arahats, isn't there, in that?
Yes, yeah.
They have a functional chitta that just...
Right, yeah.
That just... I don't know quite what it does, but it just exists in the world.
Yeah,
and it
right.
doesn't produce...
Right.
It
So, in a sense, and if you think, the idea of them there being kind of people of nothing, in a sense, all the good bhavana before can just flow out, because there's no blockage. In a sense, there's no something in the way.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes, actually, yeah.
The main point is we can't pin them down.
Yeah.
So we won't get answers to these questions. The point is they aren't pinnable down.
Yes.
The Buddha was very emphatic about this with regard to himself, was he not?
Yes.
So, I mean, going back to bhava thing, there's a lot of stuff about, we want to bring bhava to an end, but it's not that we want vibhava. It's not ending something. It's, well, one way of putting it, but I don't know whether this is enough to say, it's not ending something, it's about not continuing it, but even then I'm not sure that goes the whole way.
Well, I'm often with the famous Dr. Johnson thing about, sir, do you mean to say that you derive the meaning from the Latin? I derive the Latin from the meaning. In other words, we have to understand the whole of what is being talked about, and then we will find appropriate ways of translating these particular terms. We can't do it the other way around. Either we understand what this doctrine of how to attain nirvana is about, or we don't. We've got to have a sort of fairly. It's the famous hermeneutic circle, of course, but you have to have a general notion of what is being said before you can pick on appropriate metaphors. But all the words that you use are going to be metaphorical, except for a few pronouns and things like that. I think everything is going to be metaphorical.
Yes, but there are layers and levels. But we don't end up just like we Malakirti when you just say nothing. Well, sometimes.
Well, not if you're invited to give a lecture.
No.
Anybody else good? Well, I'm going to have one more go then.
Okay. Right.
Peter, if I were giving this talk, in a way, I would start off with what are the range of common words available in these ancient languages like Pali and so on. And as I did, in fact, start off more or less in what my book, What the Buddha Taught, I said, you've got this fundamental contrast which is odd for us between being and becoming. And being by definition is unchanging, and becoming by definition is perpetual change. And this, is the kind of framework for all the religions of this period. And so bhava is precisely the side which means being, becoming, etc. Whatever words you particularly choose in a particular context, and of course different words will be good in different particular contexts. I must say, I myself have found coming into being sometimes a useful translation. There are many others, but I noticed you never used that one, but I think it can be useful. But the point about it is, again, you look at binary oppositions, what is bhava the opposite of? It's the opposite of existence, and existence for them and not for us, and we have to learn this when we study Buddhism. Existence means unchanging existence.
Well, I'm not. Is it the depends. Bhava is the opposite of vibhava, and vice versa.
Well,
it's a kind of contrast to.
Kind of, but if you take, that's bhava in the sense of positively becoming something, and vibhava is passing out of existence. That's the opposite of coming into existence, opposite passing out of existence. But even in English, we're using the word existence. And that's not appropriate, really, for there, because existence, attita, or astita in Sanskrit, etc., is... that's why Brahman is not... You couldn't say nothing about Brahman except Satchidananda.
I don't think Buddhism has a complete problem with the idea of atti, attita, or existence. It's said that Nibbana, atti, exists.
Because Nibbana is the opposite of everything we normally experience in our lives.
Yeah.
So everything in the rest of our existence, and that includes everything in the seminar, and even what we're going to do at dinner time, is in the realm of bhava, not in the realm of atti.
Yeah, I think you're actually loading. The word bhavati just means is something.
Well,
or come to be.
No,
well, it's that and coming to be.
I do protest that is not correct.
At all.
I think if I may say, it's important to keep in mind that, like in Sanskrit, the way to say A is B, you would normally have a nominal sentence without what we call a copula.
Yeah.
Now, this is conceptually, from the conceptual, I think it's a very, very important point. Whenever you have a bhavati, it really introduces a dynamic dimension in the statement.
Right, okay.
So A bhavati, B, it means rather it transforms into, change into, it's a very different from, and I think this is a point of language which has very important, consequences, also at the philosophical level, and very often is not really taken that much into account. Whereas I think it's really extremely...
Come to my party.
Sorry, I know. I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
But...
okay, that's a fair point. That would support the kind of common translation becoming. But even that, I don't think that gets the nuances that bhava as a nidana is not just... It's your particular way of becoming or being. It has a specific...
but it isn't exist.
Yeah.
No, okay. But it's your kind of nature, your particular, as I say, way of being. No, one of the reasons I use that translation, it's kind of way of being does suggest the kind of active side of one's nature.
Oh, yes,
and it's an action.
I don't object to that as frequently as a translation. That depends on particular context and so on. But there's one thing that it really isn't, and that is active existence.
In a static
always
sense.
contrasted with that.
I think really you have three different, I mean, as far as comes to my mind in Sanskrit, you have a nasty kind of sentence where really existence is at stake. Then the nominal sentence, shunyata rupa, that is a kind of a temporal statement, a categorical, A is B, quite outside any particular historical context. And then with bhavati, it's really a very different matter that really introduces a notion of becoming.
And
B.
that would also apply to hoti.
No, I think it's. Well, it's the same word. It's exactly. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Very quick one. Not quite related to this, but from the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta theme, Samudaya Satya, you have three characteristics of Tanha. The first one, Bonapavika. The second one, Nandi Rakasakata. The third one, Tatra Tatrabin. Bonapavika, some clinical psychologists were studying this. They translate this as habit. A habit. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, well, in terms of bhava as a way of being, that will obviously include, a lot of that will be your habits, your habitual mode of being, if you like. So, but a craving as leading to ponabhanika, leading to bhava. Yeah, your cravings, your clingings, your attachments shape your way of being, your habits. Yeah, it would include that, I think. Maybe not only that, but certainly that would be a strong component of it. Yeah. You kind of, you are the creature of your attachments, desires, clingings. Yeah, would relate to that, I think. Yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'll just thank you again very much, Peter.
Okay.